Hey there, thank you for checking out Chris's Texas Sports Podcast. I'm Chris, by the way. Justin Verlander tied former Tigers and Mets teammate Max Scherzer for 10th on the all-time strikeout list against the Reds on Monday afternoon. But the Astros lost to the Reds 5-3, and that snapped their 5-game winning streak. JV pitched 5 innings. He said he's not quite there in getting back to postseason form. Anyway, the Astros continue the series against the Reds tonight. Spencer Getty gets the start for the Astros. Meanwhile, the Rangers lost to the Yankees 8-4 on Monday. They're going to be without pitchers John Gray and Tyler Mahle for the rest of the season. They beat the Yankees Tuesday night 7-4. Nathan Eovaldi gets the start for the Rangers tonight. The Texans have named their captains for the 2024 season. They are quarterback C.J. Stroud, left tackle Laramie Tunsil, wide receiver Stephon Diggs, right guard Will Anderson Jr., linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, safety Jimmy Ward, and long snapper John Weeks. The Texans are ranked number 7 in the NFL Power Rankings going into Week 1. On Good Morning Football on NFL Network, Akbar Jabimia, I'm probably mispronouncing it. In fact, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, said the Texans could be the biggest threat to the Chiefs becoming the first team to win 3 straight Super Bowls. I'll have more on the Chiefs later. The Cowboys are number 10 in the NFL Power Rankings heading into Week 1. Also on Good Morning Football, Kyle Brandt picked Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons as the Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, next to look back at the 1979 Houston Oilers. The 1979 season was the 20th anniversary of the Houston Oilers. The Dairy Queens around Houston had a promotion where they sold commemorative glasses. My mom got me one. They were coached by Bum Phillips. They played in the Astrodome. I can't remember if you asked for it or if it came with a meal. I know she bought me nachos with the glass one time. Anyway, like I said, they played in the Astrodome. Their head coach was Bum Phillips. It was the first year that I really watched them. I watched a little bit of them, the playoff games in '78, like when they lost to the Steelers in the AFC Championship game. Anyway, they finished with an 11-5 record for second place in the AFC Central behind the Steelers. They beat the Cowboys on Thanksgiving and beat the Steelers on either Thursday Night Football or Monday Night Football. That's also when the Love You Blue movement got started. In the playoffs, they beat the Broncos 13-7 in the AFC wildcard game. Quarterback Dan Pastorini, running back Earl Campbell, and wide receiver Kenny Burrow got hurt. They then beat the Chargers with their backups 17-14 in the AFC divisional round. The starters were back in time for the AFC Championship against the Steelers, but unfortunately they lost to the Steelers, who went on to win the Super Bowl again, becoming the first team to win 4 Super Bowls. That was a game where the touchdown catch by Mike Renfro was called back. I went to the Welcome Home rally they had that night in the Astrodome for them. A friend of my mom's took me. That's where Bum Phillips made his famous "kick the SOB" in speech. When somebody got arrested, I saw him being led away by the cops in the parking lot. Key players for the Oilers that year were quarterback Dan Pastorini, running back Earl Campbell, fullback J.C. Wilson, fullback Rob Carpenter, wide receiver Ken Burra, tight end Mike Barber, center Carl Malk, linebacker Robert Brazil, linebacker Greg Bingham, safety Vernon Perry, cornerback Tim Wilson, punter Cliff Parsley, and kicker Tony Frisch. Earl Campbell led the NFL in rushing and was the NFL MVP and also made the Pro Bowl. All right, coming up, I'll tell you about a game I watched between the Astros and Reds from years ago. All right, I watched the game between the Astros and the Reds from 1981 on YouTube. It was played on May 9th, 1981 at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. It was the NBC game of the week with Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek on the call. Players for the Astros were Jose Cruz, Alan Ashby, Art Howe, Craig Reynolds, and Joaquin Andujar. They had played on the 1980 NL West champion team. There were lots of new faces on the Astros that year, including Dickie Thon and Danny Heap. Thon had a promising career that was cut short after he was beaten in a game in 1984 against the Mets. Players for the Reds included Johnny Bench, Dave Concepcion, Ken Griffey, George Foster, and Ray Knight. It was on the classic MLB1 channel. There's a whole bunch of channels that have old broadcasts of Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, college football, college basketball. The actual broadcast that they had recorded and then uploaded to YouTube. It had commercials and NBC promos from back then. It was recorded off of WMAQ TV Chicago, and it was a few weeks before the 1981 strike. It also included the pregame show with Brian Gumbel. I had just moved to Rosebud back then, but I can't remember if I watched it. I do remember watching Nolan Ryan's fifth no-hitter. It was also on the game of the week. Anyway, they cut away to a game between the Giants and the Expos in Montreal. Merle Harmon called that game. He later became the Rangers' TV announcer the next season in 1982. Anyway, back to the Astros-Reds game. The Reds won that game 9-5. They had the best overall record in 1981 and would have won the NL West if they hadn't been for the strike. But they were like behind the Dodgers in the first half, and the Astros in the second half after the strike, before the strike and after the strike. All right, next to look at the 1980 Cotton Bowl game. Okay, I also started watching college football back in 1979, and here's a look at the 1980 Cotton Bowl game, which was played on January 1st. Me and my sister went with my dad to our uncle's. He lived in Texas City. Anyway, back to the 1980 Cotton Bowl. It was played between the University of Houston Cougars, coached by Bill Yeoman, and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, coached by Tom Osborne. The Cougars were the 1979 Southwest Conference champions that also won in 1978, while the Cornhuskers finished second in the Big Eight. U of H was the third title for U of H in up to the past 3 years. They joined the SWC in 1976. And they ended up ranked number 8 in the AP and number 6 in the coaches poll. It was 60 degrees at kickoff in Dallas, far cry from the sub-zero temperatures they had the year before. That's when Joe Montana brought Notre Dame back after drinking when he had the flu and he drank some chicken soup at halftime. I had the flu that day too. I was 9. I missed ended up missing going back to school from the Christmas holidays. Anyway, and I didn't eat chicken soup, by the way, but I eat it sometimes. Anyway, Nebraska scored first on a 9-yard run by halfback Jarvis Redwine. Then in the second quarter, U of H scored on a keeper by quarterback Terry Elston. That left the score tied 7-7 at halftime. Nobody scored in the third. U of H took the lead on a field goal by Kenny Hatfield. That gave U of H a 10-7 lead. Nebraska then took the lead back when Jeff Fenn caught a 6-yard touchdown pass from Jeff Quinn. That made the score 14-10 Nebraska. Houston won the game with 12 seconds left when Eric Herring caught a 6-yard pass from Elston. The final score was Houston 17, Nebraska 14. That's the last time U of H won a Cotton Bowl game up to this time. The game was shown on CBS, shown on Channel 11 in Houston. Lindsey Nelson had the call for CBS. I think his colorman was Paul Horning. All right, I told you I was going to talk about the Chiefs. Well, not exactly the Chiefs. I want to talk about their years in Dallas as the Dallas Texans. That's coming up next. Okay, the Kansas City Chiefs played in Dallas from 1960 to 1962 as the Dallas Texans. They were a charter member of the American Football League, which was founded by their owner, Lamar Hunt. In 1960, their head coach was Hank Stram, and they played in the Cotton Bowl. They finished 1960 with an 8-6 record for second place in the AFL West. Key players on the team were quarterback Cotton Davidson, who had played at Baylor, running back Abner Haynes, who played at North Texas. Haynes led the league in rushing with 875 yards and scored 9 touchdowns. They beat the Raiders in Week 2 for their first win. Of course, after they moved to Kansas City, the Raiders were going to be probably their biggest rival. Now in some alternate timeline where they stayed in Texas but moved across the turnpike to Fort Worth, the rival obviously would have been the Cowboys, but being the AFC and NFC would have played on each other every few years. So the bigger rival probably would have been the Oilers, who probably would have stayed in Houston. And Nashville would have got an expansion team. Anyway, the games were broadcast on WFAA radio, which was still doing its frequency switch from 570 and 820 with WBAP. So you may have listened on 570 one week and 820 the next. Or you might have heard the game on one frequency and had to switch over to hear the rest of it on the other frequency. In 1961, in the 1961 draft, they drafted center E.J. Hollow from Texas Tech and tackle Bob Lilly from TCU. Lilly, of course, was also drafted by the Cowboys, who he signed with and had a Hall of Fame career with. Hollow had a successful career with the Texans Chiefs franchise. They finished in 1961 with a 6-8 record for second in the AFL West. Hank Stram was still their coach, and they still played the Cotton Bowl. They moved their training camp to SMU, which is where Lamar Hunt went to school. Of course, he's rich. Anyway, in a game against the Patriots in Boston, a Patriots fan ran in the end zone and blocked a touchdown pass, which would have tied the score in the Texans game against the Patriots, which they ended up losing. Now to 1962, their last year in Dallas. They were the 1962 AFL champions, Hank Stram beating the Oilers in double overtime in the AFL championship game. Hank Stram was the AFL Coach of the Year. They were led by quarterback Len Dawson, running back Curtis McClinton, who was the AFL Rookie of the Year, and running back Abner Haynes. Anyway, as I said, that was their last season in Dallas. Even though they were better on the field at that time than the Cowboys were, more fans went to Cowboy games. The AFL had players who were going to be Hall of Famers, but the NFL at that time still had the bigger names. Like Jim Brown, Johnny Unitas, Sam Huff, and others. That's when the Lombardi's Packers were coming up. Of course, the Cowboys had drafted Bob Lilly in 1961, and they already had Don Meredith, and they would soon add more of their legendary players during the following years. So the Texans moved to Kansas City for the 1963 season. My first trip to Branson, Missouri back in 2013, I watched on the PBS station out of Springfield, or at least one of the stations from Springfield, a film that had been made of looking back on the Chiefs' first year. Merle Harmon, who I just mentioned earlier, was their announcer, I think, of that first year. And he narrated or was working for NKC Kansas City TV back then, and he was the narrator for the film, and he showed him talking with Coach Stram and everything. Anyway, the move ended up working out for both the Chiefs and the Cowboys, as they have won a combined 9 Super Bowls. The Chiefs obviously having more success recently than the Cowboys. Well, I guess I'll let you go now. On a Friday, look ahead to the NFL and college football games. And an update on the Astros and Rangers. Anyway, be sure to hit the download button. Leave a like and a rating. Follow and subscribe on whichever platform you may listen to me on. My name is Chris Carlisle, and I want to thank you for listening.